Welcome to the World Art Now podcast, exploring the world through the material culture of its people, in association with Michael Backman Limited.
Hi, this is Michael Backman, and I'm here with Robyn Flemming. Robyn is the author of Skinful, a Memoir of Addiction. The book has just been published, and it's a fantastic read. I've read it myself, and it chronicles Robyn's struggle with addictions, and particularly with alcohol. It's a book that can be ordered anywhere in the world through Amazon and other similar outlets for books, including physical bookstores even. Now, Robyn works professionally as an editor, which is how I first met her. She, in fact, is the editor of several of the books that I have written. Originally from Australia and now describing herself as a nomad, Robyn divides her time between the US, Hungary, Malaysia, and anywhere else that takes her interest. Robyn, firstly, congratulations on Skinful. I mean, I've read it cover to cover, and I've got to say, for me, it's one of the books of the year that I've read. I absolutely loved it. And I loved it for several reasons and at several levels. The first reason is because it's a hell of a good story. And another reason is because I just loved how you've told it, and I love the structure of the book, which is so clever, but also how it's written. And that's hardly surprising because you've been an editor professionally, and so you've been editing other people's works, including my own, for a large number of years. So it's hardly surprising that you can write. But I've got to say to you, you can really write. It's just fantastic.
Thank you, Michael. It wasn't easy, let me tell you. It was it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Not telling the content, not telling my personal story, but the craft of writing a compelling memoir, a compelling book.
Yes. Yeah.
I had a lot to learn about that, even though I am an editor.
Yeah, that's certainly true. A lot of people, I mean, I've written several books, and as you know, since you've edited one or two of them, a lot of people say, how do you write a book? And I often say, well, you basically sit down and you start working really hard. And also don't start until you've got a really good structure. So for you, how did you write? What was the process? I
had some false starts because I got advice right from the beginning. I knew that I could write a compelling short piece, an anecdote. I knew I could tell stories.
Yes.
And one of my first guidelines for myself was just tell it as if I were running around Central Park in New York at 5:30 a.m. and telling a friend about something. So I can write a funny story, or I can write an interesting story that's self-contained. But when everything had to contribute to a narrative arc, I found the selection process difficult because I have many stories.
Right.
And I had to make those that I wanted to keep work very hard to propel the themes. And if something was self-contained and funny but didn't actually add to the overall narrative arc, I had to, as they say, kill my darlings.
Right. Be prepared to dump stuff, even though it was good and possibly important for you, but you just had to get rid of it if it didn't slot in like a jigsaw. Yeah. And I think it's important to say at this point that the book really covers two broad themes. One is that of being a nomad, because for many years now, you really haven't had a fixed place of residence. You basically float around the world, which is what the digital era allows you to do now. Being an editor, you can work anywhere. You can work in any hotel room or anyone's house, whatever, as long as you have a good internet connection. And the other thing also is that the other theme, main theme of the book, is your battle with addiction. Now, I've known you, Robyn, for 20 years. And for a lot of that time, I had no idea that you had a problem with alcohol. And so it was only until relatively recently that you started to tell me about this and so on. And then, of course, I've now read the book. And it's been really illuminating. So the book really has these two important streams, the one of travel, and it's a fantastic travel narrative. I mean, it's a hell of a travel book, because you go to that many countries, and what I found really interesting was that you'd been to so many places that I'd been, and I was able to read your perspective. You'd even stayed in the same hotels and the same guest houses and so on. But then for a lot of that time, you were secretly drinking, and I've got to say, it didn't affect the quality of your work. And I should say also for people listening that one of the first things I said when you said that you had a problem with drinking, and I said, "Oh my God, were you drinking when you were editing my books?" And it turns out, so yeah, maybe why don't you tell us, for people listening, describe the drinking, and also would you describe yourself as an alcoholic or as a problem drinker?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the subtitle of Skinful is A Memoir of Addiction. Addiction as a phenomenon. So my addiction to alcohol was one of a number of addictions, and I address various ones of those. That was the most problematic because it was causing me fear and anxiety and shame and embarrassment. And as time went on, you know, from initially being a social lubricant when I was in my 20s to becoming, you know, a reward at the end of the day, goes through all of those phases. Then it became the thing that my day revolved around. I was never a morning drinker, or, you know, I used to drink at lunch in the 80s when everyone drank at lunch in the 80s, particularly in the publishing industry. But the drink at the end of the day became essential, to the point where once when I was living in Hong Kong, I had a panic attack when I couldn't have the amount of white wine that was my medication.
Yes.
And so one of the other addictions is travelling. You know, I now haven't had a drink for nearly 11 years.
Right.
But I have an addictive personality, and I explain why I think that is so. In the book, I explain why I think that is so. To do with emerging from my childhood, as many of us do, with some emotional pain, some insufficient nurturing, and I think we're all on that spectrum. And, you know, actually my experiences are not horrendous; they are normal. They're on the spectrum, but they're not unusual. Many people emerge from childhood as bent out of shape as I did. But it's enough for each of us to spend a lot of our life putting those experiences in some sort of context that we're comfortable with. And addictive behaviours and resorting to addictive substances is one way that we juggle numbing our pain and filling a void. So, you know, I'm quite typical. And so I wasn't the type of drinker who got done for driving under the influence. It wasn't a big factor in any important relationships that I had. And I was able to work, I was presentable, I was high functioning. But that was my lover. That was my main companion at the end of the day. And so there is a term that's being used now to describe that kind of drinking, and it's grey area drinking.
Right.
As opposed to alcoholism. The problem with the term alcoholism is that I could have said, I'm not as bad as my friend who's an alcoholic, therefore I'm not an alcoholic, therefore I can still drink because I'm not as bad as that. It's not an either-or thing. Grey area drinking opens up the possibility of seeing where you are on a spectrum and saying, you know, this is not doing me any favours.
That's certainly what I got from the book. Is it is such a continuum of as you say, it's not black or white whether you're an alcoholic or not. Yeah. But I suppose you were definitely a problem drinker because you felt ashamed in the end of what you were doing, and you went to great lengths to hide it. And there are some quite interesting parts in the book where you talk about staying in a hotel in Hong Kong, and then having too many bottles in your room, and then
this was in Kuching, in Sarawak,
in Malaysia, and so then having to go out and take them out, not leaving them for the room cleaning staff, but putting them in public litter bins.
Yes, that felt really terrible.
Yeah,
but up until that point, it's how much will I trade off in order to have this thing that I need? Yes. I feel I need, and as the addiction grows, you rationalise trading off more and more and more, which was where I ended up in 2011. I have traded off too much already, and I'm not going to trade off anymore. Yes. I faced that this was only going to progress and get worse, and I already had a secret life that I protected, but the shell, I use metaphors and imagery in the book, fragile shell.
Yes.
I was barely keeping my secret.
I think one of the things in the book which is so compelling is that you're so honest, that you don't hold back, and that makes it so gripping because as a reader, it's as if you've got a very good friend who is you, the author, and you're confiding in us just everything. And you become so believable and so real in what you've written because you were not holding back. And then you come up with these incredible one-liners every so often, which are just so arresting, and which, I'd be gliding through it thinking, this is interesting. Will she stop drinking or will she keep drinking? And you sort of think, I've got to get to the end of the chapter, and then I've got to start the next chapter to find out. And then I think, oh no, Robyn, she's gone off and done it again after she's promised herself she wouldn't, and so on. And then you lace the text with these one-liners, and I think two of my favourite ones are when you're talking about growing up in a family with other children and so on, and you said basically your parents were too busy to be really good parents, and so as a small child you had to learn to hold your own hand. And I thought, what a lovely image, not a necessarily positive one, but what a great way of putting it.
Yes.
And then another line which absolutely floored me, which I thought was just so brilliant, was you simply just put in a line where you said, damaged people damage people. And I thought, wow, that's so profound. And they sort of bounce along without any great warning, and you think, oh my God, that's incredible, as these pithy one-liners, and the book is full of that, and I love it for that.
Well, I tried not to blame my parents in the telling of this story. I put them in their own context of the time, the 50s,
that's true.
60s.
Yes.
They were damaged, and they parented as best they knew, but their actions had consequences. And I became the person that I was. I was desperate to leave home and not have my father be the boss of me, because he had been an inconsistent disciplinarian who believed in corporal punishment, and he I have a strong sense of what's fair and what's not fair, and I saw his discipline as very unfair, and he never apologised to me if he got the wrong end of the stick, and I just wanted to be out from under him. So ironically, I to medicate the pain, to self-medicate the pain, and the fact that my mother had 3 younger children and didn't have a free hand to hold mine, and I had to, I was desperate for someone to take my hand and provide some sort of nurturing. Ultimately, I created the situation myself, and I had to take responsibility for letting alcohol be the boss of me.
Yes, yeah.
But, so that addiction to alcohol got out of hand because alcohol is an addictive substance. And I was drinking for emotional reasons, not because I had a palate, and enjoyed wine.
And wine was the
well, I
thing
used to drink anything,
okay.
but as it became more of a problem, I reduced. I wouldn't even drink a beer. I rarely drink a scotch because the amount of alcohol I allowed myself became so prescribed. I couldn't mix things.
How much?
This is a mental thing.
How much, say, on a typical night would you drink?
It depended if I was training for a marathon.
Yeah, this is another story.
Yes,
we'll get to
another
that.
addiction. So I used extreme behaviours to try and control my drinking for decades, or a decade and a half, including running marathons. If I was training and had to get up and run in with a friend at 5:30 in the morning, I could not have more than 2 or 3 glasses. I would have 4, knowing that I was trading off something for the next morning. I would always have a shower, which meant I had to trade off some sleep in order to get up in time to have a shower before meeting a friend to run.
And if you weren't going for a run or a marathon, and I
wanted 6, a bottle and a half.
A bottle and a half a night
of white wine.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah, because I was numb by the end of it.
Right.
If I had any more, I would open my eyes at some later stage and find the light was still on. I don't know. I would pass out.
Yes. Right.
But 6, I could get up, I could turn the lights off, I could, but I wouldn't be able to run the next morning.
So yeah,
and it was a battle all the time to manage that.
Right.
So I eventually.
And there's a battle with guilt as well.
There's all sorts of negative emotions around that. But by the time I became a nomad, which was a year and a little bit before I got sober, and I left Australia as another desperate change in my life, determined to get sober, and being homeless in the world, self-employed and single, I thought, I'm stacking the odds here that I will get sober because it's too dangerous if I don't.
Oh, that's interesting. So you almost like force... Yeah, so you left Australia, where you had returned to after having lived in Hong Kong, and you'd started a business there and so on. Went back to Australia, and then decided you were too comfortable there, and that you would force yourself into difficult situations in order to try and cure your drinking.
Vulnerable.
That's really interesting as a strategy. But then, of course, you got very much into you looked for things to replace the drinking, and collecting art became one of them too.
It was one of my interests and things that I could, engage with.
Yeah.
Collecting, it was funny because I decided I wanted to. I actually edited a book about collecting art for a publisher in Australia. And I talked to the author and said, I have some art, because by then I'd been meeting artists in my community and I'd been buying their work and supporting them. And I said, I buy some art, some local artists. And he said to me, it's funny how sometimes people can just say something to you that will change your life. He said, take it up a notch. So I was very interested in photography by then, and I read Art Collector magazine in Australia, and I was in the community of the local artists and the local art gallery. So I did some research, and I decided that I would buy some serious photography. And I went to my local bank and asked for a significant bank loan.
Right.
And he said, what do you want it for? And I said, I want to buy some art.
Right.
And he said, you mean a car, don't you?
Yeah.
No, I don't mean a car, I mean art. He said, that's very unusual. I've never had anyone ask that before. So he had to go and get approval to okay the loan, but he did.
Okay.
And I bought some significant photography, which later on I sold it three times what I paid for it.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's great.
It was my best investment ever.
Okay.
But by the time I left Australia, I had acquired quite a bit of art.
Right.
And what am I going to do with this? Because I'm going to become a global nomad. I'd sold my house and everything. So it went to the local art gallery on long-term loan.
Right.
And they incorporated it in various themed exhibitions as appropriate. But I still, when I returned to Australia for COVID, I continued to acquire art. It's a compulsion.
Yes. Well, it's, as you say, like it's another form of addiction, and I think with the collectors that I deal with, they are
There's no end
addicts.
to a collection.
No, and that's a beauty of collecting. And then you sort of think, God, people are collecting widely in an area, but why have they got 17 versions of this one thing?
Yeah.
And
because they're not the same to them.
They're not the same to them. To anyone else, they probably are. Yeah. I collect as well, and I do the same thing. I think, why am I buying another one of these? I've already got 15. Do I need another? Yeah. And for some reason, you do. Yeah. So it's a strange thing, and so I think a lot of my clients and who are collectors exhibit the same sorts of behaviour that. So maybe collecting art and antiques is some sort of a response to some sort of emotional thing that's happened in the past. You're filling a gap. Or
It's some sort of nurturing behaviour.
Yeah,
but it only has a short-lasting effect. So you have to keep.
Yes.
The satisfaction you experience the pleasure. You continue to experience the pleasure.
Yes.
But you need to keep feeding that need.
You do. It is like a drug addiction where you need another hit. And I've had clients who ring me and they'll still say, "Oh God, what have you got for me? What have you got?" And they're almost desperate, and they almost don't care. Yeah. And if I tell them that there's something they should have, they'll just take my advice and go, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll have it." Yeah. And it's kind of and I think that feeling of satisfaction lasts for a week or two, and then they're on wanting the next piece.
And you get into a whole irrational area. I've just been in Borneo.
Yes. In
the dark heart of Borneo. With a suitcase, because I'm now a global nomad again. And I bought from, two of them were from the makers.
Right.
Woven traditional Dayak indigenous baskets.
Oh, great. So, you have no home.
I don't, and I'm living out of a suitcase. And,
yes.
They stand one stands nearly a metre high.
Oh,
what am I doing? But I couldn't resist.
No,
So then I have to find someone to leave it with until I eventually go back to Borneo.
Yes.
But I still had to have it. But it's also, particularly when you know the maker or the artist, it's an engagement. It actually creates, it's not just, buying something off a shelf. It's
no. Of course, that is the thing with art.
There's that aspect too.
Yeah. You're not just collecting physical property. You're collecting stories, and you're collecting a piece of history, and so on. And I think that's why we all do it because, and you're a storyteller. You've edited people's stories. You've now told your own story, and you're also in the act of collecting stories, which is what you're doing when you're buying an artist's art.
And also, before I became a nomad, I had 46 addresses. In my lifetime, I became a nomad at nearly 58.
Right.
I had 46 addresses up until I became nomadic.
Well, then you say you're nomadic now, but having 46 addresses sounds rather nomadic.
I can't imagine what the number of sets of keys I've had in my life.
Well, I think you've essentially always been a nomad, but you've just given it a label lately.
But ironically, I really love routine, and in any environment where I am, I'll go and buy a bowl. I've done that here in London.
Yes.
And I brought a shawl that I bought in Spain and I lay it over the bed. So I'm adding my little touch.
Well, I think what you're also doing, because you work every day, so you're creating a work environment as well. So whilst you're nomadic, you're not aimlessly nomadic. You're working every day, and you need a workspace. So you need some familiarisation.
But I also need a place that's aesthetically pleasing to me. Definitely. So just adding a few little touches of my own. But, I had other, classic addiction, smoking, dysfunctional relationships with, inappropriate lovers. All of those.
I love that. That's another one of your great one-liners. Dysfunctional relationships with inappropriate lovers. Yeah, I like that.
Or looking for I forget the line, but it was something like, going night clubbing in Hong Kong in my 30s, looking for connections with enticing strangers or something like that.
I must say, look, I was talking with my mother earlier today, and I said that I was going to do a podcast later today with the author Robyn Flemming, and I mean, my God, my mum is probably a target audience in some respects, because the great book buying public in Western countries could probably be summed up by older women. But these are the people who buy books, voraciously and read them. And my mum was just saying, after having read the book, she feels like she's never met you, but she feels like she knows you now. And she just said, I so admire Robyn. I just admire her. I admire her for never giving up, and for just constantly travelling and seeking out new experiences, never putting up with setbacks, and just dusting herself off and getting up and going again. Yeah. And so I think a lot of people would find your story so inspiring, because you just keep going, and the book is like that, chapter after chapter after chapter. You sort of think, good heavens, does she never stop? And the answer is no. Yeah. And here you are. I must say, you're embarking again of being a nomad without a particular home anywhere in any country. I think after this, you're off to Ireland, then you're off to...
I'm going to Dublin just for 2 days, but then back to New York, where I haven't been for 3 years because of COVID, but where I have a life in New York.
Yeah, because you do marathon. We still haven't talked about your running, and which is another addiction. But then after that, you're considering going back to Hungary, I think you were saying, or back to Budapest.
Well, when COVID started, I was using Budapest as a base, and I had a residence, 5-year residence permit.
And then you're wanting to catch the Sarajevo Film Festival.
Well,
later.
I actually now have a heavy workload in August, so I don't know. Okay. I booked my hotel where I always stay in Sarajevo. I love saying that. No. It's called Colours Inn.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good. There's a plug for it. But after that, you were then off back to Malaysia?
No. So basically, I'll be in Europe again. For the summer, for August. Right. And then I'll be back in the States.
Okay.
And late October, I'll be doing a little bit of travelling in the States to Michigan, and then up to Vancouver. But I've been invited to talk with a book group of mature women in Hawaii. Right. On my way back to Asia at the beginning of November. So, this particular journey, I can hang it on the book, that I'm promoting the book.
Yeah, the book.
But it's also my comfort zone. Yeah. And this life that I live that, was interrupted by COVID is my dream life, but it's some people's worst nightmare. Yeah.
And at this point, what I might reveal, and hopefully you won't mind, is that you are going to be 70 this year.
Yes.
And I just, it's extraordinary, because other people who are 70, most people are, thinking about, well, they're probably retired and have been so for quite a few years. But it's like your life is always on the verge of taking off. Like, I guess I feel the same way. I always feel like I'm just about to take off. I'm just about to get into the main part of my life, and it's kind of like you're the same. You've been doing this for such a long period, but you're always curious, and you stay curious. You always want to see the next thing, and I know you're thinking about writing the next book and so on, and certainly I know for my mother would be delighted. She said to me she couldn't stand finishing your book because she didn't want to give up. She didn't want to lose a good friend, basically. She wanted to keep it going for as long as possible.
Great. I love your mother.
Oh no, well, she even said to me, she said she put off the last chapter for several days. And then there were other times when she couldn't wait to get home. She was at some social function and she said, look, I really had to get home just to read the next chapter. Yeah. So,
and they're short chapters. They're good for bedtime reading.
They are short chapters. They're very short and pithy, and but you just race through the book, and it is, like I was saying before, you sort of think, oh God, Robyn's finally given up drinking, but you sort of think, oh no, I'm only halfway through the book. Uh-oh. And sure enough, by the next chapter, we're back on it, and it's such a...
the drinking, yes. There was an 11-month period where I did stop drinking
right.
In the middle of the book.
And that's an interesting thing, actually. I have a friend who does this. He'll listen to this and be really cross with me. But he does this stunt whereby he gives up drinking for 2 or 3 months to convince himself he doesn't have a drinking problem, and then as a reward for that 2 or 3 month stint of not drinking, he then goes back on to drinking.
I did the same. Yeah. I thought, that was easy. It was so easy. I can postpone this giving up.
Yeah, so I don't have a problem because I've just proven to myself I don't have a problem, so I can get back to drinking. And
but then it took me 17 years to stop again.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it was heading in the wrong direction.
So tell me about the marathon, because that's another, like a mini theme in the book, is that you get into running at what, the age of, when did you really start running?
I did my first half marathon at 44.
Right.
And I've now done 48 half marathons and 5 marathons.
Wow.
I no longer run because I also have very brittle bones, and if I trip, which I often do, I'll break a bone. Okay. So I'm no longer running. But running is a metaphor as well. You know, for me, my whole life has been basically I had to imagine what sort of life I wanted to have, because the family I grew up in, the life that was on offer was not appealing to me. And I got myself to university. You know, I made decisions. I need to win a scholarship. I made all those choices about what I wanted to experience in my life for myself. And then I had to make them happen. And at some point in the book, when I was trying to get a permit to work in Hong Kong, I tried every which way to get a permit. And I ended up writing a letter to someone who was a senior government official, and he had been a university friend of a former boss of mine. And I explained to that person that, what I wanted to do was experience as much as possible of the Hong Kong publishing industry at a time when Hong Kong was going through major changes. China had just opened up. It was fascinating. And I wanted to come at it from all these directions. I didn't want to work with one publishing company. And I say in the book, I didn't want it not to happen because I hadn't tried hard enough. And that probably has been one of the principles in my life, in my personal relationships, in running a marathon, that you can only achieve anything one step at a time.
Yes. Yeah.
Even writing the book was one word at a time.
God, yes. Tell me about it. Yeah. Writing a book is... I often liken it to, I've written, I think, 10 or something. I've just done another one and a manuscript. And I often feel, you feel a bit like Michelangelo or something, in that you start with a block of stone. Yes. Yeah, which is you set it all down, and a lot of people think, oh, that's it. And that's actually just the start of it. Yeah. Because then comes the chiseling and the day after day after day of chiseling, cutting and polishing, until you end up with something which is really quite extraordinary. And you stand back and you look at it and you still think, oh my God, how could I possibly have done that? And you can do it because it is word by word, line by line, day by day, and it is such a long process. But probably 80% of writing a book really is this cutting, editing, polishing process that turns it from just a word dump into something that should be quite magnificent. And you've certainly done that.
Yes, I when I had the first full draft, which took me about 4 years to write. Right. I went to Athens for the winter, specifically to complete the first draft, because I'd had various false starts. When I finally realised the best way to tell this story was simply, just chronologically,
just tell it,
because there was a natural narrative arc.
That's the thing. So not to be too clever as a writer, too. Just keep it stripped back and get rid of any adjectives and adverbs. And just
So the first full draft was 130,000 words. Ooh. The finished draft now is 80,000 words. So I had to lose nearly half of that draft. Plus, I had to add a whole layer of content that hadn't been there, which was the underpinnings about my childhood, which I added late. So many stories, many whole months of adventures don't appear in the book because they were stories in themselves. You know, my original title for the book, my working title for years was "Where in the World Are My Orange Underpants?"
Oh, Robyn, yes.
Yes, and those orange underpants do figure in this story, but...
They do. There are one or two stories where your underpants end up not where they probably should have. But anyway, we'll leave that for readers to find out.
Yes, they're a metaphor, of course.
Naturally.
But, you know, I had to, as you say, I had to carve out of that mass of material something that was complete and beautiful.
Yes.
And finished.
Yeah.
We've just been for a walk and seen some beautiful, massive sculptures.
Yes.
And you can see that they were a block of material.
Yes.
And now they're perfectly formed. You know, but it was very, very difficult, and I had so many addictions to talk about that, and I'm still addicted. You know, but there are positive addictions. Running had both was both a way to moderate my nightly drinking because I had a training program and I needed to get up and run for 10 kilometres the next morning. I got rewards for my effort. It was, you know, it's very effective as a, you know, in that way of validating myself. It was a way to meet people. It was a way to get into communities as a traveller. Yeah. I put myself forward to be members of teams. I ran across the state of Vermont. Right. In the middle of the night, one of my 3 legs of a relay team. Right. You know, I was in the forest beside a stream on my own at 2 a.m. with a head torch that attracted every insect from, you know, miles around. But I did it for the team, you know, and I wasn't passed out in a hotel room having had a bottle and a half of wine. Yeah. I had an amazing experience. Yeah. That was when I was still drinking.
I mean, it's just extraordinary you've packed all of this into your life, because there is just so much to it, so much to you, Robyn, and that comes across so clearly in the book. You know, it's one hell of a life that you've lived.
Well,
you haven't wasted time.
I want to write. I want to write I don't know if it can just be the rest of the story, but my feeling is that we do only have this one life. Yep. And that there are turning points in life. There are 4 turning points in my book, and it's important to have some sense of your own development that you recognise this is a turning point, this is where I can make choices, this is where I can change my direction, and that it's never too late. Yes. You know, I'm going to be 70 and I'm heading off into the world, I'm still working, I've got a book to promote, I have friends that I've made over the years who I'll be really happy to see. You know, and I had some private quests, perhaps, without telling too many tales.
I think that's the next book topic, perhaps those questions and hopefully their resolution. Yeah,
it's exciting, but I have to look after myself.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think in the book shows that, you know, you're really good at that, and you've had problems, but also you've been the solver of those problems, so I think the book is many things. It's inspiring, and it's a bloody good read, I must say. And also, from being a writer myself, I just appreciate the craft of how you've set down the words. I mean, it works at so many levels, and for me, just the sheer beauty of how you set down words, I thought was fantastic. I loved it for that. So it works at so many levels. But maybe at that point we should leave it, and I think what we'll do is wait for you to churn out the next book, which my mother and myself and others, we can't wait for, and then we'll have to do another podcast.
Sounds great to me.
Thanks so much, Robyn.
Thanks, Michael.
You have been listening to the World Art Now podcast in association with Michael Backman Limited. To hear more, visit worldartnow.com.